How's it going, Jack Tackers, and welcome back to another video for you guys. Today I'm going to be doing my review for The Flash Season 9, Episode 5, Mask of the Red Death, Part 2. Now, if you saw my review for last week's episode, you would know I wasn't a big fan of the first part of the storyline, and I was kind of worried going into this episode because I didn't know for sure if they were going to end this storyline with Red Death on a high note, and for the most part, I do think they nailed the landing a little bit. I mean, there was some good stuff in this episode, and it was much better than episode 4, and I think it was pretty good overall. Granted, it wasn't perfect, but yeah, let's just go through the episode here. We have Red Death and the Rogues invading CCPD at the very beginning, and Red Death basically takes Kramer hostage, and we find out Barry's still low on his speed. Obviously, he was low on his speed in the last episode. And then Cecile tries to track Red Death down, and apparently her powers are growing, but then we kind of realize that maybe that's not the case. But I also feel like, there's already been leaks, I guess, and kind of set photos that later in this season, Cecile's apparently going to be getting her own suit. Oh boy. But it does make it seem like maybe her powers actually aren't growing in this episode. I'll get to that later, but then maybe they are. I don't know. It's debatable. I'll get into why later in this review, why maybe her powers aren't actually growing, but that's a small thing. That's not a big thing about this episode. I don't really want to talk about that much, but I did want to briefly touch on it. Okay, but then Barry wants to go to Red Death's base to save Mark still, which I understand. I have like a love-hate relationship with Mark. Sometimes I like him, sometimes I don't. And I guess by the end of this episode, I was like, I guess Mark's a cool guy, whatever. And Red Death basically hacks a satellite at CCPD, and her Sentinels are unleashed on Central City. And I gotta say, Javicia Leslie's acting, I mentioned it last episode, it's just still not good here. I am so sorry. Which is very weird, because I guess we'll just talk about it now. Batwoman shows up at the end of this episode, obviously Javicia Leslie playing that character, and the acting is like a night and day difference. Javicia Leslie's pretty good as the character of Ryan Wilder Batwoman, but as the character of Red Death, playing an evil person and a bad guy, this kind of lunatic, she overacts in scenes, and she just sounds goofy, looks goofy when she's overacting as this villain. And as a good guy, I think she's a fairly decent actress. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend she's, deserves an Oscar, but, it's okay. Whatever. But as a villain, she wasn't very great. But, we'll talk more about the Red Death storyline at the end of this review. Anyways, Keown wants to go with Barry to get Mark, and then he's like, no, you shouldn't come with me because you're literally a few weeks old and whatever. Keown was good this episode. She wasn't in a lot of the episode, but I do like the character of Keown. I still wish we got Caitlin or Frost back instead. I don't know why we're doing this. It's kind of weird. Anyways, going back to the whole Cecile, are her powers actually getting stronger or growing? We find out that the reason she had a vision of Mark, which I don't know if I touched on that, probably didn't, but she has this vision of Mark being at Red Death's base, and we find out it was a trap. Red Death basically implemented that into her head. So we don't know for sure if Cecile's strong or not. I mean, she's strong, but it was basically a trap, and Red Death takes the rest of Barry's speed, which was kind of intense. Now Barry was completely powerless, and then Red Death reveals she's working with Grodd, which was something I was looking forward to this episode. I didn't know for sure if Grodd was going to be in it or not, and he did make an appearance, and that was pretty cool. And Red Death, I guess, was working with him. But then Barry has to go and convince Grodd that, no, you're still a good guy. You have to help me save the world, which is kind of annoying. Barry always talking the villains out of doing bad things because that's what Barry does. But I will say, it does work a little bit better with the character of Grodd. Maybe it's because he's a monkey, and it's a bit more sympathetic. He's a bit more of a sympathetic character, I would say. And so him talking, Barry talking Grodd out of, I guess, siding with Red Death was a bit more believable than Barry talking down another villain. I don't know. But anyway, Hartley and Goldface and Jocko, they basically think they lost after Barry loses his speed. And yeah, they leave Barry. There's a quick Iris and Keone scene. Again, going back to Keone, I think she was pretty good this episode because Keone kind of struggling to find her place in Team Flash. Iris is basically telling her, just because you don't have powers like me, you still have a place in Team Flash. It was a good scene, actually. It wasn't horrible because that's one thing I struggle with the show, and a lot of people have already complained about this for years. All the characters get superpowers and are superheroes. Chill. Like, Barry should basically be the only one with powers, and maybe one other person. Maybe. Max. And that's it. But yeah, that was a decent scene. And then, going back to the Grodd thing, we have that, like, Joe pep talk kind of brief moment with Barry and Joe, which I thought was kind of sweet. I mean, I always love Joe scenes and Joe pep talks, and they're pretty good. And Barry actually kind of gives Joe a pep talk and a little bit in an interesting way. But yeah, Barry visits Grodd, and that's ultimately where Barry is able to finally get his speed back because he sparked Grodd with a little bit of the Speed Force. And I mean, yeah, it was kind of cool, I guess, that Grodd was able to help him with that. I really like that. I will say, though, one thing about Grodd this episode, I wish he did more in the episode. Now, maybe it just wasn't in the budget. A lot of things aren't in the budget. Is what it is. I'm not gonna clown on it that long, okay? But I did wish Grodd did a little more. I wish maybe when Barry visited Grodd in the woods that maybe they fought for like a brief moment. Although it really wouldn't have made sense because Barry didn't have speed and he could have easily died against Grodd. But I think they could have done something maybe a little more interesting there. Just like maybe Grodd's chasing Barry or something. I don't know, Barry has to climb a tree. I don't know, something a bit more exciting. I think that would have been, it wouldn't have to been like a super long scene, just a quick little thing. I think that would have been fun, just because I love the character of Grodd so much, and this might be like the last episode we ever see him in. It probably will be the final episode we see Grodd in, which is kind of super sad, and this also might be the last episode we see Joe, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, Grodd, he was cool in the episode nonetheless. Like, I can't be too mad with what they did with him in this episode. He's still a good guy. And again, I think Grodd being, I guess, a quote-unquote good guy works better with his character. With some other villains, it would be a bit questionable. But yeah. Anyways, once Barry gets his speed, he meets back up with Red Death. And they have a big fight, which is... it was pretty fun seeing Red Death basically throw all the batarangs at Barry, and Barry has like this lightning shield. It's pretty badass. It was pretty good. And then Hartley and Goldface and Jocko show back up because Barry ends up getting beaten the heck up. But then Hartley, Goldface, and Jocko end up getting, beat up as well. And Red Death is pretty powerful still. But then obviously Batwoman shows up. And I mentioned that earlier in the review, but again, yeah, Javicia Leslie, she's great at playing the character of Batwoman. I'm not sure why she's so weak. We'll put it that way. I'm not sure why she's so weak at playing a villain, but I've talked about that enough. I think she's a great person. I don't want two people to be upset about that or anything. And then I do like that Batwoman mentions Kara. I think she also mentions Alex and Nia from Supergirl, which is kind of cool. Brings me back to the Supergirl days. That was pretty nice. And then basically at the end of the episode, Joe and Jenna apparently are going to move. Joe's going to take Jenna to the countryside, and Cecile's is going to stay with Team Flash. And Cecile's obviously a little devastated by the news, but she ultimately understands why this has to happen. And Joe's trying to shield Jenna from, I guess, the craziness of the superhero life. I don't know if that's going to go so well, because I feel like whenever you try to hide something from a child, it ultimately ends terribly, but whatever. And yeah, this might be Joe's last episode. I don't know for sure. I'll be honest. I don't know for sure if it is his last episode. I'm sure someone could easily let me know down in the comments if it is Joe's last episode, or I could just Google it. But, it seems like it very well could be, or if it is, it might be one of his last episodes. I mean, I would not be surprised if he shows back up in the finale. I really hope he does, but he might be gone for the next, couple episodes at the very least. And also we have Chester and Allegra getting together officially. Who cares about that, really? Then we have Iris getting announced that she's pregnant. I mean, Keone basically figures it out that Iris is pregnant. Again, Keone, pretty good this episode. And again, I like her character. It's just, yeah, I'd rather have Caitlin back, but. And overall, this was better than last week's episode. But I want to give my brief thoughts on I kind of think this Red Death storyline was decent overall. However, I will say maybe it should have been Oliver being Red Death. I'm just going to say that. A lot of people have said that. In my If I Was a Showrunner series, I talked about, well, I didn't just talk about, I made Oliver Queen Red Death in my version of the show. And I think they could have done it better, though, because, I don't want Oliver's last appearance in the Arrowverse to be him being a villain, but they could have done exactly what they did with Batwoman making an appearance. They could have had Oliver Queen somehow make an appearance. I don't know. I mean, Oliver's already returning in this season. So however way they explain that, I mean, I want Oliver's last appearance in the Arrowverse to be him being a good guy. I don't want the last memory of Oliver Queen in the Arrowverse to be a villain. So maybe some people would maybe be against him being Red Death. But again, they could have just had Oliver Queen come back as Green Arrow somehow. How? I don't know. There's a lot of ways you could have done it, I guess. But I'm not going to get too much into that. That's just my 10 cents. I just wanted to say maybe it should have been Oliver. It would have been a bit more emotional because some people didn't watch Batwoman. And I've actually seen people comment like on TV Time, which is like an app you can watch TV, or not really watch TV on, but whatever. I'm not going to go into all of that. Now I'm just rambling. But on TV Time, the app I use, I will say there's been people in the comments of the episodes for this season of The Flash being like, do people think we care about Ryan Wilder? Who's this Batwoman chick, really? Because some people don't really watch Batwoman. I mean, people didn't really watch Batwoman, and they didn't really care about this character of Red Death. Like, it wasn't a big, crazy reveal. Imagine if it was Oliver. Granted, it would have probably been obvious from the get-go, and it probably would have been spoiled, but whatever. Okay, I'm done. I've talked a lot about this episode, but I mean, this episode wrapped up a lot of things. It really did. It kind of is the start of a new beginning for this final season. It wrapped up the Red Death stuff that has been going on for the past 5 episodes. So I had a lot to say, I guess. But there you go. That's just my overall thoughts and review. It was a decent episode. It probably was the best episode of the season, or definitely one of the best episodes of the season. At least it was better than last week's episode, because you saw my review for last week's episode. I didn't really love it. This one is decent. Again, cool to see Grodd. Cool enough to see Batwoman. And Red Death is over. And yeah, a lot of cool stuff. Iris is pregnant. A lot of stuff was dumped on us. But yeah, please let me hear your thoughts on this episode down in the comments below. I'm very interested to see what you guys have to say about this. I mean, genuinely, what are you feeling about the final season? What are you feeling about the episode? Because yeah, I'd love to have a conversation down in the comments. It'd be pretty fun. But yeah, let me hear all that down in the comments below. And if you liked this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.